Today on Sports Central, we'll be going over our next final prediction of this offseason, and it's going to be over the Arizona State Sun Devils. And this is a team that was 8-5 last season, ended up having a great year overall. They were able to beat off Oregon. They crushed their chances of making it to the college football playoff. Also had a couple of great wins in there, and once again, going 8-5 overall was a great season for this team. But whether or not Arizona State will improve on that in 2020 and why I think this team could be a big contender next season is what we're going over here today. We're also going to be going over your returning production along with a full prediction and preview on every game on the Sun Devils schedule going into the 2020 season. So with that, let's look at your season trends from last season. Once again, they were 8-5 overall. They were 5-3 between September and October, then 3-2 between November and the postseason. So once again, this is a team that was very consistent all season long. They did have 5 wins, can't forget about that, but this still was a team that all around throughout the season did put up some really good wins, had a great season all around, so you can't forget about that. But some of your key wins from last season, they did beat off Michigan State on September 14th. That was a big win there, and of course Michigan State, I do understand they were not a very good team last season, but still the win in East Lansing 10-7, all around a good win there for Arizona State. And considering Michigan State's in the Big Ten, which I would consider to be a tougher conference than the Pac-12, that certainly was going to be a tough game going into it anyway. They also beat off California 24-17, and don't forget that California last season, of course they had a bumpy season because of some injuries, but don't forget that team genuinely did have a good season. It just was the injuries that ended up beating them at the end. But in the end, that was still a great win there for Arizona State for sure. I consider that to be one of their key wins, especially with having to win it on the road. They also beat off Oregon 31-28. Definitely the signature win of the season for this Sun Devil team. I'm sure that this season, or the 2019 season, will be very well remembered by Arizona State fans for that Oregon win there, because that one was huge. But they also beat off Florida State in the Sun Bowl, I believe, 20-14. That was on New Year's Eve. So they also got a bowl win on top of that. All around, great season for Arizona State. As far as the returning production looks, they returned their starting quarterback, Jayden Daniels, in which, I think he's a very underrated quarterback, one of the most underrated quarterbacks in all of the nation. Last season he had a huge improvement, and he was a great player for sure. He was definitely one of the best quarterbacks in the Pac-12 last season. He had nearly 3,000 yards, 17 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions last season. I believe that's got to be one of, if not the lowest stat of interceptions of any quarterback in the FBS. Especially for a starting quarterback that's working full time. He put up a very impressive season. Also had a 61% completion percentage, which really 61%, for college football, that isn't great. But he definitely can improve on that in the 2020 season. And if he's able to up that completion percentage by a good 2 to 3% even, that would make a big difference for this Arizona State offense going into next season. And in general, I expect him to do so. I think Jayden Daniels next season is a dark horse Heisman contender. No one's talking about him, but if Arizona State goes on to have a good season, and if Jayden Daniels in general is able to put up, say, 3,500, 4,000 yards, he will be in the Heisman talk for sure. As far as the running back core looks, you lose your top running back in Eno Benjamin. That's going to be a huge loss for this team, as he was a major player on this offense. 1,400 yards last season with 12 touchdowns for this team, so you can't forget about that. Eno Benjamin definitely will be the toughest loss for this team going into next season. Well, actually, you also have Brandon Aiyuk. You are losing him as well, and he was, I believe, a first-round draft pick, so you can't forget about him. He had 1,200 yards with 8 touchdowns last season, so yeah, that's going to be definitely a tough loss as well between Eno Benjamin and Brandon Aiyuk as well. Both of those players were major for this offense and definitely were some of the best at their positions in the entire Pac-12 conference in general. Their top returning running back is A.J. Carter, and last season, really, he did not have a whole lot of action, and I'm sure most people don't really know his name. Of course, he only had 75 yards last season, so really he hardly even took any snaps for the Sun Devils last season, but he did get 75 yards, and it is very likely that we will see him as your top running back for next season. They also return their second wide receiver in Frank Darby. Expect a big season out of him for sure, as he will likely be your top receiver. He had 600 yards last season with 8 touchdowns. You also lose your third receiver in Kyle Williams, so that does concern me a little bit as well, but he did have 520 yards with 2 touchdowns, so he did not have as big of an impact as, say, Brandon Aiyuk or Frank Darby did, but still he was a big receiver for this team, and it's going to be tough for Jayden Daniels to lose 2 of his top receivers. And honestly, if this Arizona State team was returning their entire receiving core, and maybe even if they had Eno Benjamin back, I could easily consider Arizona State to be a national contender for next season. This team could easily, especially if the Pac-12 still kept their non-conference games going, this Arizona State team could easily be say a 10 or 11 wins team next season. But that's not the truth. But I'm just saying, this team has got a lot of talent, especially with Jaden Daniels at quarterback. It's just kind of a shame that they had to lose a couple of receivers going into next season. As far as the offensive line looks, you do lose one on there, which really isn't all that terrible. You lose one defensive lineman, one linebacker, and two in the secondary. So you do lose 4 on the defense, but once again, that's right around average. Usually most defenses lose 3 to 4. So in the end, that's really not all that bad for Arizona State. But definitely watch out for Jaden Daniels next season. He is easily going to be a big impact player for this team next season and for the Pac-12 in general. He should easily be right up there with one of, if not the best quarterback in the Pac-12 next season for sure. Also brings up the question, chances of winning the Pac-12 South next season. Of course, it's wide open considering Utah is losing quite a bit of talent. I mean, you got Arizona State in there. You got several really good teams. I mean, USC definitely will be up there to win that division next season. There are a few teams for sure in the Pac-12 South that I could see winning that division. But I definitely think Arizona State, they're right up there with USC, I would say. And considering they're all losing 3 non-conference games, it's going to be really tough to tell as to who's going to be my favorite to win that division. But in the end, I definitely think it's going to be a close race, and I think Arizona State in general definitely would be one of my favorites to win that Pac-12 South next season. As far as your schedule looks, of course, you've had 3 games canceled already since the Pac-12 has canceled their non-conference games. You will not be playing Northern Arizona, UNLV, or BYU anymore. All 3 of those games are now canceled, which kind of is a bit of a downside, and it is a bit of a downer for Arizona State. I mean, I would probably have expected Arizona State to win all 3 of those games. The BYU one would have been a little bit tougher, but I think in general, those are 3 wins that kind of go out the window there. But you do start off the season with a tough one against USC on the road on the 26th, and that's quite possibly your most important game of your entire season there against USC. I mean, it's a big divisional foe, and you got to consider USC is going to be right up there to win that Pac-12 South as well. So for Arizona State, can't forget about that one there. You got Oregon State on the 3rd of October, big game there as well. You follow that up with UCLA. And then you got Colorado and Washington State, back-to-back road games. Then in your November, you got a very tough month. You got California to start it off. Then you got Oregon on the road on a short week. And then you got Utah on the 21st, followed by a trip to Arizona to finish off your season. So really, this is going to be a pretty tough schedule for Arizona State next season. I would consider this to probably be one of, if not the toughest schedule or conference schedule in the Pac-12 next season. I mean, you got to play USC, you got to play California, Oregon, Utah. All 4 of the teams I expect to be right up there with the top teams in the Pac-12 next season. You got to play all 4 of them. But in the end, here's what I'm expecting out of your first 3 games. I think you beat off or actually lose to USC. I think that USC game is going to be very close, though. I mean, don't sleep on that team. I think USC next season is going to be just as good, if not better, than Arizona State. But I think USC definitely is going to be a close game. Don't get me wrong, but I think USC does get the win there in the end, especially with it being a road game. But then I think you get 2 big wins against Oregon State and UCLA. I think you win both of those pretty easily. So you start off your season 2-1. You go into your late October and your early November. I think you get a win against Colorado and Boulder. That's going to be a big win there. You also get a win in Pullman against Washington State. So you come into that California game, which California next season, if you haven't seen my predictions on them, I'm very high on that Cal team. I think next season California is another team that definitely needs to be watched out for. But I think in the end, you go 4-1 into that Cali game, and I think you do take a loss there at home to that team. But I definitely think it's going to be close. I mean, that one was very tough to predict. I mean, California next season having to come on the road to Arizona State, which, I mean, let me remind you, Arizona State has been a tough place for a lot of teams to play in the past. And so I think California, I mean, that's going to be a close game. It was very tough to predict that one. But I've got California winning that one in the end. So you go into your last 3 games of the season with a 4-2 record, really not all that bad at all. And for your last 3 games, I do think that you go 2-1. I think you do lose to Oregon on the road, and I went back and forth on that one too. I think Oregon next season, they're definitely going to be very, very fired up to beat this Arizona State team after what Arizona State did to them last year in 2019. And so I think Oregon, I mean, they're going to be the more motivated team. They're going to get the win there over Arizona State in the end. However, I think you do beat off Utah in a close game, and I also think you beat off Arizona in an easier one. So you do get a big win over Utah in the end. So, but yeah, your record prediction for next season is going to be 6-3. I think overall, I mean, 6-3 is not terrible at all. I mean, easily considering, like, this could have easily been a 9-3 team if the non-conference games were still going. I mean, if you look at it that way, I mean, this Arizona State team looks much, much better. But still, 6-3 overall, not a bad record prediction at all for Arizona State next season. I think Jaden Daniels leads this team to a great season. But I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments below on Arizona State. If you disagree with anything here, I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments below. But yeah, thanks again for watching. If you enjoyed this preview, be sure to slap a like on it and subscribe as well. It really helps out the channel, and I really appreciate that. But as always, thanks again for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for more from All Sports Central, and I will see you all later.